Here's a problem with theistic belief. So theists believe in God, but they don't believe in God on the basis of following evidence and reason wherever they lead. Rather, there's some prior convictions, or there are some values that they associate with believing in God. Maybe they were raised in a community of believers, or maybe they came into religion to meet emotional needs. But the point is that when the theist finds evidence for God, what they're doing is they're finding evidence to back up something that they already believe, not on the basis of evidence. It's almost like the reason and evidence are post hoc rationalizations of prior convictions, and that's a problem. Now here's a solution to this problem. Follow reason and evidence wherever they lead you. Just make a decision. I'm going to just face reality. Sometimes the facts of reality aren't what we want them to be. But if we let fear motivate us, then we won't find out what's actually true. And so this is why I really appreciate skeptics and critics of religion deeply and sincerely. I'm not just saying that. I mean, I think one of the values that they bring to people is these instruments of reason and evidence, these powerful tools to really get to reality. I mean, all of us have a limited view of the world, every single person. And we're only going to find out the limits or even just the problems in our view by following reason and evidence. So that's a solution. Now, there are two obstacles that I think a lot of theists can have to actually taking up this solution of following reason and evidence wherever they lead and just holding no belief sacred, right? Like belief in God, that's not a sacred belief. I'm going to test that, following reason and evidence. What does reason, what does evidence actually say about that? Two obstacles I want to talk about. So one obstacle to following reason and evidence wherever they lead is that they might lead you to question propositions that you might think shouldn't be questioned. So for example, maybe you think that racism is wrong. And if somebody says, let's question that. Maybe it's good to treat people as inferior based on their race. Let's investigate that. You might have this feeling like, oh no, that's not one of the things that we should be investigating. Well, here's my response to that worry. If something actually is wrong, by investigating it, then we'll find out more truths that support its wrongness. And then that can help us to see even with greater clarity that it is wrong. Now, you might think that if God exists, God would be a perfect being, right? I mean, this is a classical conception of God. So this being would have a perfect mind and would know all truths and love and appreciate the virtue of finding out what's true. And if that's right, then wouldn't God himself, if God exists, actually appreciate you facing reality, even questioning God's existence, not as putting up your fist to saying to God, I believe you're there, but I don't want to follow you. I'm saying, God, I want to find out if you're really there using the tools you've given me, reason and evidence. Well, it seems like if God exists, then following reason and evidence would be a virtuous thing to do, and God would appreciate that. So I can't see how belief in God needs to be protected from scrutiny. It seems to me that we can use the tools of reason and evidence to investigate every single proposition, and that doing that will help us to get clear on whether those propositions are actually true or not. But here's a second worry that you may have about questioning every proposition and following reason and evidence wherever they lead. You might think that belief in God is not the kind of belief that's supported by reason and evidence. When you think of reason and evidence, you might think of science, you might think of mathematics. But when you think about theological beliefs, you might think that those beliefs are based on some other mechanism. If you're familiar with Alvin Plantinga's work, then you'll know that there's this whole theory about how belief in God can be formed even by God himself. And it's not really based on an investigation of scientific facts or mathematical principles. It sort of comes by way of God's Spirit. Well, my response to that is that reason and evidence can include every data of experience. And so even if you accept this kind of what's called reformed epistemology, where God can produce beliefs in you, God's going to produce those beliefs in you through a certain experience, perhaps the experience that something seems true. So in fact, the Reformed epistemology is not even inconsistent with just following reason and evidence wherever they lead. Maybe the evidence that you're discovering is evidence of a sense within you that God exists. But if you continue to investigate, well, do other people have that sense with respect to different conceptions of God? And if they do, and you find that out, well, then you've got to apply reason to figure out, should we trust one sense over the other? Why? Why not? And I think that if we do that, then we'll be more likely to find out that our beliefs are not matching with reality if they're not. And that's something we want to know. And so the purpose here is to really, I just want to say, highlight this value that I think skeptics are bringing, this value of following reason and evidence wherever they lead, and to just applaud that and to agree with that and to encourage everybody, whether you believe in God or not, to take up those tools and to aim to find out more and more about the world without holding certain beliefs as unquestionable. And I think another reason I'm making this video is because I find this sort of apologetic for reason and evidence given a lot of times by non-theists. And I wonder if maybe the apologetic for reason and evidence could be more powerful if theists and non-theists together were united by this core value.